Today's video is going to be a little different. Let's talk about some areas where psychologists make a very big impact. This gets me so excited. So if you are a psychologist, you're interested in becoming a psychologist, or you're just curious about what we do and curious about what our impact might be, hit subscribe, like, throw this in the group chat, send it to somebody. Welcome back, y'all. My setup is a little different today because I had a morning. I just had a morning. So in light of being human, I'm just going to roll with it. And I wanted to zoom out a little bit and talk about the greater impact that psychologists have, because I sometimes think about, why do I do the work that I do? And of course, I really enjoy seeing clients on an individual basis, but I sometimes have to think about the greater picture, because if not, it could feel just like a job. And I feel like being a psychologist is almost like a calling, and I only speak from a personal experience. I know a lot of the people that follow me are either psychologists in training, you're already a psychologist, or you're in the mental health field. And a lot of us are concerned with getting hours. A lot of us are concerned with, like, how do I get licensed? How do I get hours? How do I do this whole thing? And a lot of us lose sight of my cat got into something. Today's a day, y'all. Today's a day. I think we lose sight of maybe the greater purpose and the greater impact that psychologists have, because we have a very, very, I don't want to say dramatic, but we have a really big impact. So why are psychologists important for humanity? A lot of us do work with individuals, couples, and families. A lot of us work in hospitals, in patient settings. A lot of us consult. A lot of us work with startups. A lot of us work in HR or team-oriented environments at work. Yes, that is true. And we work on an individual basis, but that individual basis creates a larger impact. And then a different way to look at this is that psychologists, in my opinion, are necessary for a society advancing as quickly as we are from a technological standpoint. As society advances, we need more brain power to treat human problems. And a lot of us are involved in solving human problems. A lot of us are involved in research. A lot of us are involved in the technological aspect of this advance. A lot of us are communicating like this through telehealth or videos. Like, we would never meet in real life, maybe, and we would never really exchange any words with each other, and here we are. So psychologists assess, treat, and diagnose mental health issues and problems. We also try to enhance well-being. We try to teach people skills so that they can manage their life effectively, and they could be not a better human, but a more efficient human when it comes to emotions. And as we're noticing an uptick in mental health issues, especially as we're dealing with a global mental health crisis, we're seeing an uptick in mental health issues. We want to try to get ahead of it. And a lot of us do feel like we're doing damage control. A lot of the damage has already been done. We can't really change the landscape of how life has gone on up until this point, but we can certainly look to the future. A lot of the conversations that we have on YouTube, at least with my community, is that, how do I become a psychologist? How do I get the hours? How do I do all of these very professional things? There's also a why. I don't do this for the money. I just don't. If I really wanted to do something for the money, I don't know, I would maybe invest in real estate or something. I would just do something else, you know. Clinical psychologists continue to be relevant and crucial in 2023. And this is for several reasons that we'll get into. The world facing various challenges with mental health and well-being. The first one is a little obvious. We're experiencing a global mental health crisis. This has been exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic and its long-lasting effects. We noticed in 2020 there was a huge uptick in mental health issues, which makes sense. Think about living in chronically unprecedented times. It's going to have a mental health impact. Clinical psychologists can identify early signs of mental health issues or mental illness. From a preventative standpoint, we could kind of forecast a little. And hopefully we're able to intervene before we get to that point. Point meaning a mental health crisis. I know we're already there. We're already there. And I don't like to give up hope that future unprecedented events could be handled with more care about our mental health. So if we address issues proactively, then we could prevent suffering. If we're on the damage control route, we can still make a really big impact. And the whole point is to improve quality of life. So even if we're working on an individual basis, that individual basis has a bigger impact, and I'll explain what that means. The second is mental health support. We provide a lot of mental health support, especially during a global mental health crisis or even just people's day-to-day. So many of you know, I'm not going to bore you with all the details. We do therapy, we do evaluations, we work with, we're like consultants for startup companies or any companies in general. We work for hospitals, we work inpatient, we work in forensics. And we basically provide mental health support to people experiencing a wide range of mental health issues like anxiety, depression, PTSD. We could also take more of an exploratory approach for someone trying to figure out their identity or figure out their purpose in life, or try to figure out if they want to make that big decision about kids or marriage or buying a house. All of this contributes to the well-being of the individual, or the well-being of the family, or the well-being of the couple. When we work with couples, we help them build strong relationships. When we work with families, we help solidify that family unit. And really what we're doing is we're enhancing that sense of community for people. And even when we work on an individual basis, a lot of the problems are very relational, very interpersonal. And even if they're not, anything that we teach our client or anything that we help them with might have an impact on how they navigate the world. So this has a long-term impact. And what we're noticing is that when people are able to effectively manage their emotions and stress, they're able to really identify the core of their mental health issues. It might not fix the situation, it might not fix the system, it might not fix the political landscape, it might not fix things that are out of our control, it might not fix natural disasters and genocide and all of this, and both can exist. It can't fix all of these uncontrollables. It does give the client a perceived sense of control that might actually make them feel a little bit more better to navigate their own life. It goes into number 3, which is recovery and resilience. So we play a vital role in helping society deal with natural disasters and unprecedented times. I remember during the COVID-19 pandemic, I was dealing with it alongside all of you, and we had to figure it out together. Another way in which clinical psychologists help is during sociopolitical upheaval, which we're noticing a lot of. Being a psychologist is extremely political, and it's something that I did not anticipate before I got in, which hindsight's always 20/20, and that shows a lot of my privilege. I'm willing to take accountability for that because as a psychologist, you have to not only work with people who are way different than you, but you're working with the minds of people who you may never really run into in real life, right? So you're really experiencing a lot of the world and a lot of this earth with people that are very, very, very different from you. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. When you work with people that are different than you, they have different barriers and obstacles. They have different accessibility issues. They might have different ways that they look at the world, ways that they navigate the world. And we have to be really sensitive to those issues. And more importantly, we have to really look at our own internal biases and address those because we have to be effective with the humans that we're in the room with. And the reason why I say being a therapist is political is because and I'm just going to speak for myself here, but most of my colleagues might agree with me that we're really for the people. I'm talking about politics in terms of law regulation and other barriers that people might face. So, for example, if I work with someone who is looking for gender-affirming surgery, and there are active laws that are against that in the state that that client lives in, that's a huge barrier that we have to talk about. And if I just say we're to have a very, very, very strong opinion against that, I really wouldn't be able to advocate for my client in the way that maybe they're hoping. And then if I really think about that, not being able to help my client with a medically necessary procedure for them, for their well-being, that might put them in a more isolating experience. Another area in which we could help is stress management. So we know that the current state of the world, we're all stressed, we're all overworked. I could at least speak for the United States. We clock the most hours worked out of any other country. There's a big problem there. That's a YouTube video for another day. If we're able to teach people coping strategies, then they might be able to teach those coping strategies to their kids or their loved ones or their coworkers. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the system is usually not made with certain people in mind, especially minorities, especially people dealing with a lot of ability and disability issues, and especially people experiencing mental health issues. The least that we could do is try to give people skills to more effectively manage their situation, even if it's outside of their control. Another area in which we have a really good impact is reducing the mental health stigma. If we just go back in time, before the 70s, that was around deinstitutionalization, where we were taking people out of mental asylums and putting them in less restrictive environments, like residential living facilities. Before that, lobotomies were the thing. And now we know that's not something that we do anymore. Psychology is a relatively new field. It's newer than medicine. And the good news is that we're gaining traction in science and research. We're using evidence-based modalities. We're doing randomized controlled trials when it comes to therapy modalities and medications. And just like a cardiologist, if they had a heart issue, they would take heart medication. Just because they're a cardiologist doesn't mean that they can't do that. Psychologists are the same way. Just because we're a psychologist doesn't mean that we are, free from mental health issues. I have crippling anxiety and ADHD, so if I were to say, oh no, we have to be perfect in order to do this job, I just want to let people know you're never going to be perfect, and it's okay. And the more human you are, the easier that your clients are going to be able to relate to you. And that goes for lay people as well. Most people feel this inherent sense of stigma or shame that they're experiencing a mental health issue. And when you zoom out and you look at the world, anybody would be experiencing mental health issues in 2023 in America right now. Some of it might be within your control. Maybe it's the way I'm looking at things. Maybe it's the coping strategies I'm using. Maybe it's people I'm choosing to be around. But a lot of stuff in life is really outside of our control. I mean, a lot of it is I don't really get to choose where I live, or the jobs that are available to me don't pay a livable wage. Or I have medical issues that aren't covered by insurance, and now I have all these medical debts. Psychologists aren't there to fix that because we can't. If I had a magic wand, that'd be great. None of us do. But creating a space and an open landscape for people to be able to talk and acknowledge these things, talk about and acknowledge these things, is the least that we could do. And we notice that it really helps people feel more connected to themselves and other people. Another area in which we have a massive impact is child and adolescent mental health. I'm not a pediatric psychologist. I don't work with kids. I have extremely limited training working with children. It's just kind of how my training shook out. I love kids. I think they're amazing. I just never had the training. If we're able to make an impact when people are young, then they grow up with all the skills that they need, and then they navigate the world a little differently. And we're noticing that with Gen Z right now. They are so aware and they're so in tune, and they're not afraid. I'm getting chills saying it. I just love Gen Z. You guys are just not afraid to speak up, and you're not afraid to say, no, this isn't working. You're not afraid to advocate. And I think Gen Z is a really good example of how society shifts with more awareness and more openness about mental health. Let's talk about Jane app. It's this video's sponsor. Jane is an all-in-one practice management software. It can help you manage your practice, and it has a whole suite of features that makes it easy to meet with individuals, couples, and families. Jane is even easy to use if you are not really that tech savvy. I really appreciate how reliable the software is. Sometimes I need to finish my session notes later at night, and sometimes I don't want to walk all the way up to my office to do it. I could log into Jane right from my laptop downstairs. Just as long as I have Wi-Fi, Jane is there. Even better, whenever I have a question, a concern, or even a suggestion for better use of the software, I could reach out to Jane at any time and talk to a real life person. And as you know, reliability and security are key to running a business, especially in 2023 with everything going on. Like I said before, you can access Jane pretty much anywhere. It has a cloud-based software that's HIPAA compliant, and the data is stored safely and securely. You can learn more about Jane here. And remember to use my code DrKC2 for a 2-month grace period on your new Jane account. Let's get back to it. Another place that might be a point of contention for some is workplace mental health. Industrial organizational psychologists notably are involved in workplace mental health. And I know what you're thinking when your supervisor says, hey, we'll just throw you a pizza party. I know y'all are burnt out. Here's a pizza party, right? That's not what we're talking about. Again, that's a system issue that we can't control. We could advocate for, and we could really push for certain things, but we can't necessarily change those things unless we have all of us advocating, which is why psychologists and just lay people advocating for these things is so important. Industrial organizational psychologists are crucial because they could identify from an outside perspective all the issues, right? And it's not like a supervisee talking to the supervisor saying like, hey, the way that you navigate is really causing me stress. The psychologist can say, hey, there's some sort of collaboration issue here. Let's come together. They can improve workplace well-being. They can reduce burnout, all of those amazing things. A big one for psychologists is suicide prevention. Psychologists and mental health professionals are key in creating and implementing suicide prevention programs. Suicide rates continue to be a global concern. Most people don't love talking about it. Let's talk about it. There are so many reasons why people complete suicide, and there are so many reasons why people feel this stigma when they have suicidal thoughts. In my experience, what I've learned is that most people complete suicide when they have no other option, when they feel like their options have run out, when they cannot fix their problems, there are absolutely no solutions. That might be one reason. Another reason is that they have intense, unbearable shame, trauma, childhood experiences, even just life experiences that really, really impact the way that they view themselves in the world. And because of that reason, maybe they just don't see another way out. I always say this whenever I talk about suicide, but if you or someone you know is experiencing anything like this, please don't make them feel weird about it. Please don't make them feel like they're an oddball or that there's something really wrong with them. They're probably feeling very overwhelmed. So help is available, 988. If you're a veteran, you'll click 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line. There's also a warm line that you could text as well, and I'm just going to put that all in this YouTube video too. And we're really concerned about reducing stigma as it relates to suicidal thoughts and suicide. I've had a lot of people in my life complete suicide, and I work with a lot of clients who have suicidal thoughts. I myself have had suicidal thoughts in the past. I have also had suicide attempts in the past when I was younger. You can do everything that you possibly can, and you might still have those thoughts. The key, at least for me, was really acknowledging that I need to see my life through to see if it gets better. And that's what keeps me going. Another area in which psychologists have a big global impact is digital mental health. This is crucial in my opinion. So I am on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on here. I don't like being in front of a camera. I actually hate it. I can't stand it. Every time I edit my videos, I'm like, oh, cringe, whatever. For me, this is the best way that I know how to get accurate, reliable, and informational experiences out there and data out there for other people. You know, when you train your whole life to do one thing, you have a niche set of knowledge, and I feel like I would be selfish to not share that with the world or share that with other people. And you don't have to become a psychologist to know about psychology or advocate for mental health. I think it's important to know the differences between a mental health professional and someone who might not have a license. There are definitely differences there. And I don't like to undermine our field. It's really hard work to become a psychologist, as you've seen in other videos. But if I really just think, I'm 33, and if I really think about growing up, I grew up without a cell phone. I got my first cell phone when I was like, I want to say 11, 12. But there were no cell phones growing up. You had to knock on people's doors and all that stuff. I don't want to bore you with the details of living in an age where there was no technology, but it was just a really different existence. So millennials, I think we had to deal with the inception of the internet and the inception of dial-up internet and all that stuff, and like really navigating that in a way that was different than before. Now we're all behind a computer screen, and it's easy to just text and make a mean comment because there's not going to be that impact, that face-to-face impact, and you're not going to be able to feel the emotions of that other person as you say that hate comment or that negative comment. And it really impacts some people. It really impacts their self-esteem and their well-being. And especially as we see people living their lives, we might do a lot of comparison. I know this is especially true for younger women and people who identify as women. It's very difficult. And with the inception of filters and everything, we think everybody has it all together when honestly everybody's just human trying to make it work. I feel like it's one of my ethical duties to be on here. And again, it's not something that I like really enjoy all the time. I take a lot of breaks, but I feel like I would be doing my community a disservice if I didn't talk about mental health and I didn't advocate for it, or I didn't just try to make it a humanized experience. The next one is mental health advocacy and policies. We kind of touched on this before. Clinical psychologists advocate for improved mental health and well-being through the form of policies, funding, and resources at the local, national, and international levels. One of the goals that my colleagues and I talk about all the time is adequate access to healthcare in general, not even mental health care. Most of us want improved access to healthcare and mental health care, reduced disparities in mental health, and more comprehensive mental health services for communities. And unfortunately, the only way that gets done is to advocate for policies and laws. So when I say therapy and being a psychologist is political, that's kind of what I mean. And the final one, research and innovation. This is a really fun one. We live in a technologically advancing society, and I always like to look at how do we advance as a society, and it's mostly with science and research. The more that we know, the more that we know how to help people. And for people who are becoming clinical psychologists and you want to just be on the clinical side of it and work with clients and all that, and families and all of that, you also have to rely on your research colleagues because they're the ones doing the research, and the way that you're able to implement all of these strategies is through research. There are psychologists who go through PhD programs or even Psy.D programs, and all they want to do is research and they want to stay in academia. That's incredible because we need people like that. And that research that's conducted informs our understanding of human behavior and the mental process and what happens up in our brain. And as a consequence, mental health treatment and interventions improve. And then society has more access to these things. They don't necessarily have more access. We have to create the access, right? I would hope that if there's new treatments, that people will have access eventually. In a world that's becoming more aware of mental health and well-being, clinical psychologists continue to be essential. We're at the forefront of addressing complex mental health issues and the challenges facing the world in 2023. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you next time.